Text 5. In course of time it came to pass that people in general became accustomed to greed, anger, pride, etc. Maharaja Yudhishthira, observing all these omens, spoke to his younger brother. Purport. Such a pious king as Maharaja Yudhishthira at once became perturbed when there were such inhuman symptoms as greed, anger, irreligiosity, and hypocrisy rampant in society. It appears from this statement that all these symptoms of degraded society were unknown to the people of the time, and it was astonishing for them to have experienced them with the advent of the Kali Yuga, or the age of quarrel. Maharaja Yudhishthira said to his younger brother Bhimasena, I sent Arjuna to Dwarka to meet his friends and to learn from the personality of Godhead, Krishna, of his program of work. Text 7. Since he departed, 7 months have passed, yet he has not returned. I do not know factually how things are going there. Text 8. Is he going to quit his earthly pastimes, as Devarshi Narada indicated? Has that time already arrived? Purport. As we have discussed many times, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, has many plenary expansions, and each and every one of them, although equally powerful, executes different functions. In Bhagavad Gita there are different statements by the Lord, and each of these statements is meant for different plenary portions, or portions of the plenary portions. For example, Sri Krishna the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, whenever and wherever there is a decline in religious practice, O descendant of Bharata, and a predominant rise of irreligion, at that time I descend myself. Bhagavad Gita 4:7. To deliver the faithful, to annihilate the miscreants, and also to re-establish the principles of occupational duty, I appear in every age. Bhagavad Gita 4:8. If I should cease to work, then all humanity would be misdirected. I would also be the cause of creating unwanted population, and I would thereby destroy the peace of all sentient beings. Bhagavad Gita 3:24. Whatever action a great man performs, common men will follow, and whatever standards he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. Bhagavad Gita 3:21. All the above statements by the Lord apply to different plenary portions of the Lord, namely his expansions such as Shankarshana, Vasudeva, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, and Narayana. These are all he himself in different transcendental expansions, and still the Lord as Sri Krishna functions in a different sphere of transcendental exchange, with different grades of devotees. And yet Lord Krishna, as he appears once every 24 hours of Brahma's time, or after a lapse of 8,640,000,000 solar years in each and every universe, and all his transcendental pastimes are displayed in each and every universe in a routine spool. But in that routine spool, the functions of Lord Krishna, Lord Vasudeva, etc., are complex problems for the layman. There is no difference between the Lord's self and the Lord's transcendental body. The expansions execute differential activities. When the Lord, however, appears in his person as Lord Sri Krishna, his other plenary portions also join in him by his inconceivable potency called Yogamaya. And thus the Lord Krishna of Vrindavana is different from the Lord Krishna of Mathura or the Lord Krishna of Dwarka. The Virat Rupa of Lord Krishna is also different from him by his inconceivable potency. The Virat Rupa exhibited on the battlefield of Kurukshetra is the material conception of his form. Therefore it should be understood that when Lord Krishna was apparently killed by the bow and arrow of the hunter, the Lord left his so-called material body in the material world. The Lord is Kaivalya, and for him there is no difference between matter and spirit, because everything is created from him. Therefore his quitting one sort of body or accepting another body does not mean that he is like the ordinary living being. All such activities are simultaneously one and different by his inconceivable potency. When Maharaja Yudhishthira was lamenting the possibility of his disappearance, it was just in pursuance of a custom of lamenting the disappearance of a great friend, but factually the Lord never quits his transcendental body, as is misconceived by less intelligent persons. Such less intelligent persons have been condemned by the Lord himself in Bhagavad Gita, and they are known as the Mudhas. That the Lord left his body means that he left again his plenary portions in the respective dhammas, transcendental abodes, as he left his Virat Rupa in the material world. Text 9. From him only all our kingly opulence, good wives, lives, progeny, control over our subjects, victory over our enemies, and future accommodations in higher planets have become possible. All this is due to his causeless mercy upon us. Purport: material prosperity consists of a good wife, good home, sufficient land, good children, aristocratic family relations, victory over competitors, and, by pious work, attainment of accommodations in the higher celestial planets for better facilities of material amenities. These facilities are earned not only by one's hard manual labor or by unfair means, but by the mercy of the Supreme Lord. Prosperity earned by one's personal endeavor also depends on the mercy of the Lord. Personal labor must be there in addition to the Lord's benediction, but without the Lord's benediction no one is successful simply by personal labor. The modernized man of Kali Yuga believes in personal endeavor and denies the benediction of the Supreme Lord. Even a great sannyasi of India delivered speeches in Chicago protesting the benedictions of the Supreme Lord. But as far as Vedic Shastras are concerned, as we find in the pages of Srimad Bhagavatam, the ultimate sanction for all success rests in the hands of the Supreme Lord. Maharaja Yudhishthira admits the truth in his personal success, and it behooves one to follow in the footsteps of a great king and devotee of the Lord to make life a full success. If one could achieve success without the sanction of the Lord, then no medical practitioner would fail to cure a patient. Despite the most advanced treatment of a suffering patient by the most up-to-date medical practitioner, there is death, and even in the most hopeless state, without medical treatment, a patient is cured astonishingly. Therefore the conclusion is that God's sanction is the immediate cause for all happenings, good or bad. Any successful man should feel grateful to the Lord for all he has achieved. Text 10. Just see, O man, with a tiger's strength, how many miseries due to celestial influences, earthly reactions, and bodily pains, all very dangerous in themselves, are foreboding danger in the near future by deluding our intelligence. Purport: material advancement of civilization means advancement of the reactions of the threefold miseries due to celestial influence, earthly reactions, and bodily or mental pains. By the celestial influence of the stars there are many calamities like excessive heat, cold, rains, or no rains, and the after effects are famine, disease, and epidemic. The aggregate result is agony of the body and the mind. Man-made material science cannot do anything to counteract these threefold miseries. They are all punishments from the superior energy of Maya under the direction of the Supreme Lord. Therefore our constant touch with the Lord by devotional service can give us relief without our being disturbed in the discharge of our human duties. The Ashuras, however, who do not believe in the existence of God, make their own plans to counteract all these threefold miseries, and so they meet with failures every time. The Bhagavad Gita 7.14 clearly states that the reaction of material energy is never to be conquered because of the binding effects of the three modes. They can simply be overcome by one who surrenders fully in devotion under the lotus feet of the Lord. Text 11. The left side of my body, my thighs, arms, and eyes are all quivering again and again. I am having heart palpitations due to fear. All this indicates undesirable happenings. Purport: material existence is full of undesirables. Things we do not want are forced upon us by some superior energy, and we do not see that these undesirables are under the grip of the three modes of material nature. When a man's eyes, arms, and thighs quiver constantly, one must know that something is going to happen which is undesirable. These undesirables are compared to fire in a forest. No one goes into the forest to set fires, but fires automatically take place in the forest, creating inconceivable calamities for the living beings of the forest. Such a fire cannot be extinguished by any human efforts. The fire can be extinguished only by the mercy of the Lord, who sends clouds to pour water on the forest. Similarly, undesirable happenings in life cannot be checked by any number of plans. Such miseries can be removed only by the mercy of the Lord, who sends his bona fide representatives to enlighten human beings, and thus save them from all calamities. Text 12. Just see, O Bhima, how the she-jackal cries at the rising sun, and vomits fire, and how the dog barks at me fearlessly. Purport: these are some bad omens indicating something undesirable in the near future. Text 13. O Bhimesena, tiger amongst men, now useful animals like cows are passing me on my left side, and lower animals like the asses are circumambulating me. My horses appear to weep upon seeing me. Text 14. Just see, this pigeon is like a messenger of death. The shrieks of the owls and their rival crows make my heart tremble. It appears that they want to make a void of the whole universe. Text 15. Just see how the smoke encircles the sky. It appears that the earth and mountains are throbbing. Just hear the cloudless thunder and see the bolts from the blue. Text 16. The wind blows violently, blasting dust everywhere and creating darkness. Clouds are raining everywhere with bloody disasters. Text 17. The rays of the sun are declining, and the stars appear to be fighting amongst themselves. Confused living entities appear to be ablaze and weeping. Text 18. Rivers, tributaries, ponds, reservoirs, and the mind are all perturbed. Butter no longer ignites fire. What is this extraordinary time? What is going to happen? Text 19. The calves do not suck the teats of the cows, nor do the cows give milk. They are standing, crying, tears in their eyes, and the bulls take no pleasure in the pasturing grounds. Text 20. The deities seem to be crying in the temple, lamenting and perspiring. They seem about to leave. All the cities, villages, towns, gardens, mines, and hermitages are now devoid of beauty and bereft of all happiness. I do not know what sort of calamities are now awaiting us. Text 21. I think that all these earthly disturbances indicate some greater loss to the good fortune of the world. The world was fortunate to have been marked with the footprints of the lotus feet of the Lord. These signs indicate that this will no longer be. Text 22. O Brahmana Sanaka, like Maharaja Yudhishthira, observing the inauspicious signs on the earth at that time, was thus thinking to himself. Arjuna came back from the city of the Yadus, Dwarka. Text 23. When he bowed at his feet, the king saw that his dejection was unprecedented. His head was down, and tears glided from his lotus eyes. Text 24. Seeing Arjuna pale due to heartfelt anxieties, the king, remembering the indications of the sage Narada, questioned him in the midst of friends. Text 25. Maharaja Yudhishthira said, My dear brother, please tell me whether our friends and relatives, such as Madhu, Bhoja, Dashara, Arha, Satvata, Andaka, and the members of the Yadu family are all passing their days in happiness. Text 26. Is my respectable grandfather Surasena in a happy mood, and are my maternal uncle Vasudeva and his younger brothers all doing well? Text 27. His 7 wives, headed by Devaki, are all sisters. Are they and their sons and daughters-in-law all happy? Text 28 through 29. Are Ugrasena, whose son was the mischievous Kamsa, and his younger brothers still living? Are Hridika and his son Kritavarma happy? Are Akrura, Jayanta, Gada, Sayanya, and Satrujit all happy? How is Balarama, the personality of Godhead and the protector of devotees? Purport: Hastinapura, the capital of the Pandavas, was situated somewhere near present New Delhi, and the kingdom of Ugrasena was situated in Madura. While returning to Delhi from Dwarka, Arjuna must have visited the city of Madura, and therefore the inquiry about the king of Madura was valid. Amongst various names of the relatives, the name of Rama and Balarama, eldest brother of Lord Krishna, is added with the words, the personality of Godhead, because Lord Balarama is the immediate expansion of Vishnu Tattva as Prakasha Vigraha of Lord Krishna. The Supreme Lord, although one without a second, expands himself as many other living beings. The Vishnu Tattva living beings are expansions of the Supreme Lord, and all of them are qualitatively and quantitatively equal with the Lord. But expansions of the Jiva Shakti, the category of the ordinary living beings, are not at all equal with the Lord. One who considers the Jiva Shakti and the Vishnu Tattva to be on an equal level is considered a condemned soul of the world. Sri Rama or Balarama is the protector of the devotees of the Lord. Baladeva acts as the spiritual master of all devotees, and by his causeless mercy the fallen souls are delivered. Sri Baladeva appeared as Sri Nityananda Prabhu during the advent of Lord Chaitanya, and the great Lord Nityananda Prabhu exhibited his causeless mercy by delivering a pair of extremely fallen souls, namely Jagai and Madhai. Therefore, it is particularly mentioned herein that Balarama is the protector of the devotees of the Lord. By his divine grace only one can approach the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, and thus Sri Balarama is the mercy incarnation of the Lord, manifested as the spiritual master, the savior of the pure devotees. Text 30. How is Pradyumna, the great general of the Vrishni family? Is he happy? And is Aniruddha, the plenary expansion of the personality of Godhead, faring well? Purport. Pradyumna and Aniruddha are also expansions of the personality of Godhead, and thus they are also Vishnu Tattva. At Dwarka, Lord Vasudeva is engaged in his transcendental pastimes, along with his plenary expansions, namely Shankarshana, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, and therefore each and every one of them can be addressed as the personality of Godhead, as it is mentioned in connection with the name Aniruddha. Text 31. Are all the chieftain sons of Lord Krishna, such as Sursena, Charadesna, Samba, the lord of Jambavati, and Rishabha, along with their sons, all doing well? Purport. As already mentioned, Lord Krishna married 16,108 wives, and each of them had 10 sons. Therefore, 16,108 times 10 equals 161,080 sons. They all grew up, and each of them had as many sons as their father, and the whole aggregate was something near 1,610,800 family members of the Lord. The Lord is the Father of all living beings, who are countless in number. Therefore, only a few of them are called to associate with the Lord in his transcendental pastimes, as the Lord of Dwarka on this earth. It is not astonishing that the Lord maintained a visible family consisting of so many members. It is better to refrain from comparing the Lord's position to ours, and it becomes a simple truth as soon as we understand at least a partial calculation of the Lord's transcendental position. King Yudhishthira, while inquiring about the Lord's sons and grandsons at Dwarka, mentioned only the chieftains amongst them, for it was impossible for him to remember all of the names of the Lord's family members. Text 32 through 33. Also, Sritadeva, Uddhava, and others, Nanda, Susanda, and other leaders of liberated souls, who are constant companions of the Lord, are protected by Lord Balarama and Krishna. Are they all doing well in their respective functions? Do they, who are all eternally bound in friendship with us, remember our welfare? Purport. The constant companions of Lord Krishna, such as Uddhava, are all liberated souls, and they descended along with Lord Krishna to this material world to fulfill the mission of the Lord. The Pandavas are also liberated souls who descended along with Lord Krishna to serve him in his transcendental pastimes on this earth. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 4:8, the Lord and his eternal associates, who are also liberated souls like the Lord, come down on this earth at certain intervals. The Lord remembers them all, but his associates, although liberated souls, forget due to their being Tatashta Shakti, or marginal potency of the Lord. That is the difference between the Vishnu Tattva and Jiva Tattva. The Jiva Tattvas are infinitesimal potential particles of the Lord, and therefore they require the protection of the Lord at all times. And to the eternal servitors of the Lord is pleased to give all protection at all times. The liberated souls never, therefore, think themselves as free as the Lord or as powerful as the Lord, but they always seek the protection of the Lord in all circumstances, both in the material world and in the spiritual world. This precedence of the liberated soul is constitutional, for the liberated souls are like sparks of a fire that are able to exhibit the glow of fire along with the fire, and not independently. Independently, the glow of the sparks is extinguished, although the quality of fire, or the glowing, is there. Thus, those who give up the protection of the Lord and become so-called lords themselves, out of spiritual ignorance, come back again to this material world, even after prolonged tapasya of the severest type. That is the verdict of all Vedic literature. Text 34. Is Lord Krishna the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who gives pleasure to the cows, the senses, and the Brahmanas, who is very affectionate towards his devotees, enjoying the pious assembly at Dwarkapuri, surrounded by friends? Purport. Here in this particular verse, the Lord is described as Bhagavan, Govinda, Brahmanya, and Bhaktavatsala. He is Bhagavan Svayam, or the original Supreme Personality of Godhead, full with all opulences, all power, all knowledge, all beauty, all fame, and all renunciation. No one is equal to or greater than him. He is Govinda because he is the pleasure of the cows and the senses. Those who have purified their senses by the devotional service of the Lord can render unto him real service, and thereby derive transcendental pleasure out of such purified senses. Only the impure conditioned living being cannot derive any pleasure from the senses, but being illusioned by false pleasures of the senses, he becomes servant of the senses. Therefore we need his protection for our own interest. The Lord is the protector of cows and the Brahminical culture. A society devoid of cow protection and Brahminical culture is not under the direct protection of the Lord, just as the prisoners in the jails are not under the protection of the king, but under the protection of a severe agent of the king. Without cow protection and cultivation of the Brahmanical qualities in human society, at least for a section of the members of society, no human civilization can prosper at any length. By Brahminical culture, the development of the dormant qualities of goodness, namely truthfulness, equanimity, sense control, forbearance, simplicity, general knowledge, transcendental knowledge, and firm faith in the Vedic wisdom, one can become a Brahmana and thus see the Lord as he is. After surpassing the Brahminical perfection, one has to become a devotee of the Lord, so that his loving affection in the form of proprietor, master, friend, son, and lover can be transcendentally achieved. The stage of a devotee which attracts the transcendental affection of the Lord does not develop unless one has developed the qualities of a Brahmana as above mentioned. The Lord is inclined to a Brahmana of quality and not of false prestige. Those who are less than a Brahmana by qualification cannot establish any relation with the Lord, just as fire cannot be kindled from the raw earth unless there is wood, although there is a relation between wood and the earth. Since the Lord is all perfect in himself, there could not be any question of his welfare, and Maharaja Yudhishthira refrained from asking this question. He simply inquired about his residential place, Dwarkapuri, where pious men assemble. The Lord stays only where pious men assemble and takes pleasure in their glorifying the supreme truth. Maharaja Yudhishthira was anxious to know about the pious men and their pious acts in the city of Dwarka. Text 35 through 36. The original personality of Godhead, the Enjoyer, and Balarama, the primeval Lord Ananta, are staying in the ocean of the Yadu dynasty for the welfare, protection, and general progress of the entire universe. And the members of the Yadu dynasty, being protected by the arms of the Lord, are enjoying life like the residents of the spiritual sky. Purport. As we have discussed many times, the personality of Godhead, Vishnu, resides within each and every universe in two capacities, namely as the Garbhodakasayi Vishnu and the Ksirodakasayi Vishnu. The Ksirodakasayi Vishnu has his own planet on the northern top of the universe, and there is a great ocean of milk where the Lord resides on the bed of the Ananta incarnation of Baladeva. Thus Maharaja Yudhishthira has compared the Yadu dynasty to the ocean of milk, and Sri Balarama to the Ananta where Lord Krishna resides. He has compared the denizens of Dwarka to the liberated inhabitants of the Vaikuntha Lokas. Beyond the material sky, further than we can see with our eyes, and beyond the sevenfold coverings of the universe, there is the causal ocean, in which all the universes are floating like footballs, and beyond the causal ocean there is an unlimited span of spiritual sky, generally known as the effulgence of Brahman. Within this effulgence there are innumerable spiritual planets, and they are known as the Vaikuntha planets. Each and every Vaikuntha planet is many, many times bigger than the biggest universe within the material world. and in each of them there are innumerable inhabitants who look exactly like Lord Vishnu. These inhabitants are known as the Mahaparushikas, or persons directly engaged in the service of the Lord. They are happy in those planets, and are without any kind of misery, and they live perpetually in full youthfulness, enjoying life in full bliss and knowledge, without fear of birth, death, old age, or disease, and without the influence of Kala, eternal time. Maharaja Yudhishthira has compared the inhabitants of Dwarka to the Mahaparushikas of Vaikuntha Loka because they are so happy with the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita there are many references to the Vaikuntha Lokas, and they are mentioned there as Mandama, or the kingdom of the Lord. Text 37. Simply by administering comforts at the lotus feet of the Lord, which is the most important of all services, the queens at Dwarka, headed by Satyabhama, induced the Lord to conquer the demigods. Thus the queens enjoy things which are prerogatives of the wives of the controller of thunderbolts. Purport. Satyabhama, one of the principal queens of Lord Sri Krishna at Dwarka, after killing Narakasura, Lord Krishna visited the palace of Narakasura accompanied by Satyabhama. He went to Indraloka also with Satyabhama, and she was received by Sachidevi, who introduced her to the mother of the demigods, Aditi. Aditi was very much pleased with Satyabhama, and she blessed her with the benediction of permanent youth as long as Lord Krishna remained on the earth. Aditi also took her with her to show her the special prerogatives of the demigods in the heavenly planets. When Satyabhama saw the Parijata flower, she desired to have it in her palace at Dwarka. After that, she came back to Dwarka along with her husband and expressed her willingness to have the Parijata flower at her palace. Satyabhama's palace was especially bedecked with valuable jewels, and even in the hottest season of summer, the inside of the palace remained cool, as if air-conditioned. She decorated her palace with various flags, heralding the news of her great husband's presence there. Once, along with her husband, she met Draupadi, and she was anxious to be instructed by Draupadi in the ways and means of pleasing her husband. Draupadi was expert in this affair because she kept 5 husbands, the Pandavas, and all were very much pleased with her. On receipt of Draupadi's instructions, she was very much pleased and offered her good wishes and returned to Dwarka. She was the daughter of Satyajit. After the departure of Lord Krishna, when Arjuna visited Dwarka, all the queens, including Satyabhama and Rukmini, lamented for the Lord with great feeling. At the last stage of her life, she left for the forest to undergo severe penance. Satyabhama instigated her husband to get the Parijata flower from the heavenly planets, and the Lord got it even by force from the demigods, as a common husband secures things to please his wife. As already explained, the Lord had very little to do with so many wives to carry out their orders like an ordinary man. But because the queens accepted the high quality of devotional service, namely administering the Lord all comforts, the Lord played the part of a faithful and complete husband. No earthly creature can expect to have things from the heavenly kingdom, especially the Parijata flowers, which are simply to be used by the demigods. But due to their becoming the Lord's faithful wives, all of them enjoyed the special prerogatives of the great wives of the denizens of heaven. In other words, since the Lord is the proprietor of everything within his creation, it is not very astonishing for the queens of Dwarka to have any rare thing from any part of the universe. Text 38. The great heroes of the Yadu dynasty, being protected by the arms of Lord Sri Krishna, always remain fearless in every respect, and therefore their feet trample over the Sudharma assembly house, which the best demigods deserved, but which was taken away from them. Purport. Those who are directly servitors of the Lord are protected by the Lord from all fearfulness, and they also enjoy the best of things, even if they are forcibly accumulated. The Lord is equal in behavior to all living beings, but he is partial to his pure devotees, being very affectionate toward them. The city of Dwarka was flourishing, being enriched with the best of things in the material world. The state assembly house is constructed according to the dignity of the particular state. In the heavenly planets, the state assembly house called Sudharma was deserving of the dignity of the best of the demigods. Such an assembly house is never meant for any state on the globe, because the human being on the earth is unable to construct it, however far a particular state may be materially advanced. But during the time of Lord Krishna's presence on the earth, the members of the Yadu family forcibly brought the celestial assembly house to earth and placed it at Dwarka. They were able to use such force because they were certain of the indulgence and protection of the Supreme Lord Krishna. In other words, the Lord is provided with the best things in the universe by his pure devotees. Lord Krishna was provided with all kinds of comforts and facilities available within the universe by the members of the Yadu dynasty, and in return such servitors of the Lord were protected and fearless. A forgetful conditioned soul is fearful, but a liberated soul is never fearful, just as a small child completely dependent on the mercy of his father is never fearful of anyone. Fearfulness is a sort of illusion for the living being when he is in slumber and forgetting his eternal relation with the Lord. Since the living being is never to die by his constitution, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 2:20, then what is the cause of fearfulness? A person may be fearful of a tiger in a dream, but another man who is awake by his side sees no tiger there. The tiger is a myth for both of them, namely the person dreaming and the person awake, because actually there is no tiger, but the man forgetful of his awakened life is fearful, whereas the man who has not forgotten his position is not at all fearful. Thus the members of the Yadu dynasty were fully awake in their service to the Lord, and therefore there was no tiger for them to be afraid of at any time. Even if there were a real tiger, the Lord was there to protect them. Text 39. My brother Arjuna, please tell me whether your health is all right. You appear to have lost your bodily luster. Is this due to others disrespecting and neglecting you because of your long stay at Dwarka? Purport. From all angles of vision, the Maharaja inquired from Arjuna about the welfare of Dwarka, but he concluded at last that as long as Lord Sri Krishna himself was there, nothing inauspicious could happen. But at the same time, Arjuna appeared to be bereft of his bodily luster, and thus the king inquired of his personal welfare and asked so many vital questions. Text 40. Has someone addressed you with unfriendly words or threatened you? Could you not give charity to one who asked, or could you not keep your promise to someone? Purport. A kshatriya, or a rich man, is sometimes visited by persons who are in need of money. When they are asked for a donation, it is the duty of the possessor of wealth to give in charity in consideration of the person, place, and time. If a kshatriya, or a rich man, fails to comply with this obligation, he must be very sorry for this discrepancy. Similarly, one should not fail to keep his promise to give in charity. These discrepancies are sometimes causes of despondency, and thus failing, a person becomes subjected to criticism, which might also be the cause of Arjuna's plight. Text 41. You are always the protector of the deserving living beings, such as brahmanas, children, cows, women, and the diseased. Could you not give them protection when they approached you for shelter? Purport. The Brahmanas, who are always engaged in researching knowledge for the society's welfare work, both materially and spiritually, deserve the protection of the king in all respects. Similarly, the children of the state, the cow, the diseased person, the woman, and the old man specifically require the protection of the state or a kshatriya king. If such living beings do not get protection by the kshatriya or the royal order, or by the state, it is certainly shameful for the kshatriya or the state. If such things had actually happened to Arjuna, Maharaja Yudhishthira was anxious to know about these discrepancies. Text 42. Have you contacted a woman of impeachable character, or have you not properly treated a deserving woman, or have you been defeated on the way by someone who is inferior or equal to you? Purport. It appears from this verse that during the time of the Pandavas, free contact between man and woman was allowed in certain conditions only. The higher caste men, namely the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas, could accept a woman of the Vaishya or the Sudra community, but a man from the lower caste could not contact a woman of the higher caste. Even a Kshatriya could not contact a woman of the Brahmana caste. The wife of a Brahmana is considered one of the 7 mothers, namely one's own mother, the wife of the spiritual master or teacher, the wife of a Brahmana, the wife of a king, the cow, the nurse, and the earth. Such contact between man and woman was known as Uttama and Adama. Contact of a Brahmana with a Kshatriya woman is Uttama, but the contact of a Kshatriya with a Brahmana woman is Adama, and therefore condemned. A woman approaching a man for contact should never be refused, but at the same time the discretion as above mentioned may also be considered. Bhima was approached by Hidimbi from a community lower than the Sudras, and Yayati refused to marry the daughter of Sukracharya because of Sukracharya's being a Brahmana. Vyasadeva, a Brahmana, was called to beget Pandu and Dhritarashtra. Satyavati belonged to a family of fishermen, but Parashara, a great Brahmana, begot in her Vyasadeva. So there are so many examples of contacts with women, but in all cases the contacts were not abominable, nor were the results of such contacts bad. Contact between man and woman is natural, but that also must be carried out under regulative principles so that social consecration may not be disturbed or unwanted worthless population be increased for the unrest of the world. It is abominable for a Kshatriya to be defeated by one who is inferior in strength or equal in strength. If one is defeated at all, he should be defeated by some superior power. Arjuna was defeated by Bhismadeva, and Lord Krishna saved him from the danger. This was not an insult for Arjuna, because Bhismadeva was far superior to Arjuna in all ways, namely age, respect, and strength. But Karna was equal to Arjuna, and therefore Arjuna was in crisis when fighting with Karna. It was felt by Arjuna, and therefore Karna was killed even by crooked means. Such are the engagements of the Kshatriyas, and Maharaja Yudhishthira inquired from his brother whether anything undesirable happened on the way home from Dwarka. Text 43. Have you not taken care of old men and boys who deserve to dine with you? Have you left them and taken your meals alone? Have you committed some unpardonable mistake which is considered to be abominable? Purport. It is the duty of a householder to feed first of all the children, the old members of the family, the Brahmanas, and the invalids. Besides that, an ideal householder is required to call for any unknown hungry man to come and dine before he himself goes to take his meals. He is required to call for such a hungry man thrice on the road. The neglect of this prescribed duty of a householder, especially in the matter of the old men and children, is unpardonable. Text 44. Or is it that you are feeling empty for all time because you might have lost your most intimate friend, Lord Krishna? O my brother Arjuna, I can think of no other reason for your becoming so dejected. Purport. All the inquisitiveness of Maharaja Yudhishthira about the world's situation was already conjectured by Maharaja Yudhishthira on the basis of Lord Krishna's disappearance from the vision of the world, and this was now disclosed by him because of the acute dejection of Arjuna, which could not have been possible otherwise. So even though he was doubtful about it, he was obliged to inquire frankly from Arjuna on the basis of Sri Narada's indication. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the first canto, 14th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Disappearance of Lord Krishna. Chapter 15. The Pandavas Retire Timely. Text 1. Sutta Goswami said, Arjuna, the celebrated friend of Lord Krishna, was grief-stricken because of his strong feeling of separation from Krishna, over and above all Maharaja Yudhishthira's speculative inquiries. Purport. Being too much aggrieved, Arjuna practically became choked up, and therefore it was not possible for him to reply properly to the various speculative inquiries of Maharaja Yudhishthira. Text 2. Due to grief, Arjuna's mouth and lotus-like heart had dried up. Therefore his body lost all luster. Now, remembering the Supreme Lord, he could hardly utter a word in reply. Text 3. With great difficulty he checked the tears of grief that smeared his eyes. He was very distressed because Lord Krishna was out of his sight, and he increasingly felt affection for him. Text 4. Remembering Lord Krishna and his well-wishes, benefactions, intimate familial relations, and his chariot driving, Arjuna, overwhelmed and breathing very heavily, began to speak. Purport. The Supreme Living Being is perfect in all relations with his pure devotee. Sri Arjuna is one of the typical pure devotees of the Lord, reciprocating in the fraternal relationship, and the Lord's dealings with Arjuna are displays of friendship of the highest perfect order. He was not only a well-wisher of Arjuna, but actually a benefactor, and to make it still more perfect, the Lord tied him into a family relationship by arranging Subhadra's marriage with him, and above all, the Lord agreed to become a chariot driver of Arjuna in order to protect his friend from warfare risks. And the Lord became actually happy when he established the Pandavas to rule over the world. Arjuna remembered all these one after another, and thus he became overwhelmed with such thoughts. Text 5. Arjuna said, O king, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, who treated me exactly like an intimate friend, has left me alone. Thus my astounding power, which astonished even the demigods, is no longer with me. Purport. In the Bhagavad Gita 10:41, the Lord says, anyone specifically powerful and opulent in wealth, strength, beauty, knowledge, and all that is materially desirable, is to be considered but a product of an insignificant portion of the complete whole of my energy. No one, therefore, can be independently powerful in any measure without being endowed by the Lord. When the Lord descends on the earth along with his eternal ever-liberated associates, he not only displays the divine energy possessed by himself, but also empowers his associate devotees with the required energy to execute his mission of incarnation. It is also stated in the Bhagavad Gita 4:5 that the Lord and his eternal associates descend on the earth many times, but the Lord remembers all the different roles of incarnations, whereas the associates, by his supreme will, forget them. Similarly, the Lord takes away with him all his associates when he disappears from the earth. The power and energy which were bestowed upon Arjuna were required for fulfillment of the mission of the Lord. But when his mission was fulfilled, the emergency powers were withdrawn from Arjuna, because the astounding powers of Arjuna, which were astonishing even to the denizens of heaven, were no longer required, and they were not meant for going back home, back to Godhead. If endowment of powers and withdrawal of powers by the Lord are possible even for a great devotee like Arjuna, or even the demigods in heaven, then what to speak of the ordinary living beings who are but figs compared to such great souls? The lesson is, therefore, that no one should be puffed up for his powers borrowed from the Lord. The sane man should rather feel obliged to the Lord for such benefactions, and must utilize such power for the service of the Lord. Such power can be withdrawn at any time by the Lord, so the best use of such power and opulence is to engage them in the service of the Lord. Text 6. I have just lost him whose separation for a moment would render all the universes unfavorable and void, like bodies without life. Purport. Factually, for a living being there is no one dearer than the Lord. The Lord expands himself by innumerable parts and parcels as Svamsa and Vibhinamsa. Paramatma is the Svamsa part of the Lord, whereas the Vibhinamsa parts are the living beings. As the living being is the important factor in the material body, for without the living being, the material body has no value. Similarly, without Paramatma, the living being has no status quo. Similarly, Brahman or Paramatma has no locus standi without the Supreme Lord Krishna. This is thoroughly explained in the Bhagavad Gita. They are all interlinked with one another, or interdependent factors. Thus, in the ultimate issue, the Lord is the summum bonum, and therefore the vital principle of everything. Text 7. Only by his merciful strength was I able to vanquish all the lusty princes assembled at the palace of King Drapada for the selection of the bridegroom. With my bow and arrow I could pierce the fish target, and thereby gain the hand of Draupadi. Purport. Draupadi was the most beautiful daughter of King Drupada, and when she was a young girl almost all the princes desired her hand. But Drupada Maharaja decided to hand over his daughter to Arjuna, and therefore contrived a peculiar way. There was a fish hanging on the inner roof of the house under the protection of a wheel. The condition was that out of the princely order one must be able to pierce the fish's eyes through the wheel of protection, and no one would be allowed to look up at the target. On the ground there was a water pot in which the target and wheel were reflected, and one had to fix his aim towards the target by looking at the trembling water in the pot. Maharaja Drupada well knew that only Arjuna, or alternately Karna, could successfully carry out the plan. but still he wanted to hand his daughter to Arjuna, and in the assembly of the princely order, when Drishtadyumna, the brother of Draupadi, introduced all the princes to his grown-up sister, Karna was also present in the game, but Draupadi tactfully avoided Karna as the rival of Arjuna, and she expressed her desires through her brother Drishtadyumna that she was unable to accept anyone who was less than a Kshatriya. The Vaishyas and the Sudras are less important than the Kshatriyas. Karna was known as the son of a carpenter, a Sudra, so Draupadi avoided Karna by this plea. When Arjuna, in the dress of a poor Brahmana, pierced the difficult target, everyone was astonished, and all of them, especially Karna, offered a stiff fight to Arjuna, but as usual, by the grace of Lord Krishna, he was able to emerge very successful in the princely fight, and thus gain the valuable hand of Krishna, or Draupadi. Arjuna was lamentingly remembering the incident in the absence of the Lord, by whose strength only he was so powerful. Text 8. Because he was near me, it was possible for me to conquer with great dexterity the powerful king of heaven, Indradeva, along with his demigod associates, and thus enable the fire god to devastate the Kandava forest. And only by his grace was the demon named Maya saved from the blazing Kandava forest, and thus we could build our assembly house of wonderful architectural workmanship, where all the princes assembled during the performance of Rajasuya Yajna and paid you tributes. Purport. The demon Mayadanava was an inhabitant of the forest Kandava, and when the Kandava forest was set on fire, he asked protection from Arjuna. Arjuna saved his life, and as a result of this, the demon felt obliged. He reciprocated by building a wonderful assembly house for the Pandavas, which attracted the extraordinary attention of all state princes. They felt the supernatural power of the Pandavas, and thus without grudge all of them submitted and paid tributes to the emperor. The demons possess wonderful and supernatural powers to create material wonders, but they are always disturbing elements of the society. The modern demons are the harmful material scientists who create some material wonders for disturbance in the society. For example, the creation of nuclear weapons has caused some panic in human society. Maya was also a materialist like that, and he knew the art of creating such wonderful things. And yet Lord Krishna wanted to kill him. When he was chased both by the fire and by the wheel of Lord Krishna, he took shelter of such a devotee as Arjuna, who saved him from the wrath of the fire of Lord Sri Krishna. Devotees are therefore more merciful than the Lord, and in devotional service the mercy of a devotee is more valuable than the mercy of the Lord. Both the fire and the Lord ceased from chasing the demon as soon as both of them saw that the demon was given shelter by such a devotee as Arjuna. This demon, feeling obliged to Arjuna, wanted to do him some service to show his gratefulness, but Arjuna declined to accept anything from him in exchange. Lord Sri Krishna, however, being pleased with Maya for his making shelter of a devotee, asked him to render service unto King Yudhishthira by building a wonderful assembly house. The process is that by the grace of the devotee, the mercy of the Lord is obtained, and by the mercy of the Lord, a chance to serve the Lord's devotee is obtained. The club of Bhimasena was also a gift of Mayadanava. Text 9. Your respectable younger brother, who possesses the strength of 10,000 elephants, killed by his grace Jarasandha, whose feet were worshipped by many kings. These kings had been brought for sacrifice in Jarasandha's Mahabhairava Yajna, but they were thus released. Later they paid tribute to your majesty. Purport. Jarasandha was a very powerful king of Magadha, and the history of his birth and activities is also very interesting. His father, King Birhadratha, was also a very prosperous and powerful king of Magadha, but he had no son, although he married two daughters of the king of Kasi. Being disappointed in not getting a son from either of the two queens, the king, along with his wives, left home to live in the forest for austerities. But in the forest he was benedicted by one great rishi to have a son, and he gave him one mango to be eaten by the queens. The queens did so, and were very soon pregnant. The king was very happy to see the queens bearing children, But when the ripe time approached, the queens delivered one child in 2 parts, one from each of the queen's wombs. The 2 parts were thrown in the forest, where a great she-demon used to live, and she was glad to have some delicate flesh and blood from the newly born child. Out of curiosity, she joined the 2 parts, and the child became complete and regained life. The she-demon was known as Jara, and being compassionate on the childless king, she went to the king and presented him with the nice child. The king was very pleased with the she-demon, and wanted to reward her according to her desire. The she-demon expressed her desire that the child be named after her, and thus the child was surnamed Jarasandha, or one who was joined by Jara, the she-demon. In fact, this Jarasandha was born as one of the parts and parcels of the demon Viprachiti. The saint by whose benedictions the queens bore the child was called Chandrakashika, who foretold of the child before his father, Brihadratha. Since Jarasandha possessed demoniac qualities from birth, naturally he became a great devotee of Lord Shiva, the lord of all ghostly and demoniac men. Ravana was a great devotee of Shiva, and so also Jarasandha. He used to sacrifice all arrested kings before Lord Mahabhairava, Shiva, and by his military power he defeated many small kings and arrested them to butcher before Mahabhairava. There are many devotees of Lord Mahabhairava or Kalabhairava in the province of Bihar, formerly called Magadha. Jarasandha was a relative of Kamsa, the maternal uncle of Krishna, and therefore after Kamsa's death, King Jarasandha became a great enemy of Krishna, and there were many fights between Jarasandha and Krishna. Lord Krishna wanted to kill him, but he also wanted that those who served as military men for Jarasandha might not be killed. Therefore a plan was adopted to kill him. Krishna, Bhima, and Arjuna together went to Jarasandha in the dress of poor Brahmanas and begged charity from King Jarasandha. Jarasandha never refused charity to any Brahmana, and he performed many sacrifices also, yet he was not on a par with devotional service. Lord Krishna, Bhima, and Arjuna asked Jarasandha for the facility of fighting him, and it was settled that Jarasandha would fight with Bhima only. So all of them were both guests and combatants of Jarasandha, and Bhima and Jarasandha fought every day for several days. Bhima became disappointed, but Krishna gave him hints about Jarasandha's being joined together as an infant, and thus Bhima dissected him again, and so killed him. All the kings who were detained in the concentration camp to be killed before Mahabhairava were thus released by Bhima. Feeling thus obliged to the Pandavas, they paid tribute to King Yudhishthira. Text 10. It was he only who loosened the hair of all the wives of the miscreants who dared open the cluster of your queen's hair, which had been nicely dressed and sanctified for the great Rajasuya sacrificial ceremony. At that time she fell down at the feet of Lord Krishna with tears in her eyes. Purport. Queen Draupadi had a beautiful bunch of hair which was sanctified in the ceremonial function of Rajasuya Yajna, but when she was lost in a bet, Dushasana touched her glorified hair to insult her. Draupadi then fell down at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, and Lord Krishna decided that all the wives of Dushasana and company should have their hair loosened as a result of the battle of Kurukshetra. Thus, after the battle of Kurukshetra, after all the sons and grandsons of Dhritarashtra died in battle, all the wives of the family were obliged to loosen their hair as widows. In other words, all the wives of the Kuru family became widows because of Dushasana's insulting a great devotee of the Lord. The Lord can tolerate insults upon himself by any miscreant, because the Father tolerates even insults from the Son, but he never tolerates insults upon his devotees. By insulting a great soul, one has to forego all the results of pious acts, and benedictions also. Text 11. During our exile, Durvasha Muni, who eats with his 10,000 disciples, intrigued with our enemies to put us in dangerous trouble. At that time, he, Lord Krishna, simply by accepting the remnants of food, saved us. By his accepting food thus, the assembly of Munis, while bathing in the river, felt sumptuously fed, and all the 3 worlds were also satisfied. Purport. Durvasha Muni, a powerful mystic Brahmana determined to observe the principles of religion with great vows and under strict austerities. His name is associated with many historical events, and it appears that the great mystic could be both easily satisfied and easily annoyed, like Lord Shiva. When he was satisfied, he could do tremendous good to the servitor, but if he was dissatisfied, he could bring about the greatest calamity. Kumari Kunti at her father's house used to minister all kinds of services to all great Brahmanas, and being satisfied with her good reception, Durvasha Muni benedicted her with the power to call any demigod she desired. It is understood that she was a plenary incarnation of Lord Shiva, and thus he could be either easily satisfied or annoyed. He was a great devotee of Lord Shiva, and by Lord Shiva's order he accepted the priesthood of King Svetaketu because of the king's performance of sacrifice for 100 years. Sometimes he used to visit the parliamentary assembly of the heavenly kingdom of Indradeva. He could travel in space by his great mystic powers, and it is understood that he traveled a great distance through space, even up to the Vaikuntha planets beyond material space. He traveled all these long distances within 1 year, during his quarrel with King Ambarisha, the great devotee and emperor of the world. He had about 10,000 disciples, and wherever he visited and became a guest of the great Kshatriya kings, he used to be accompanied by a number of followers. Once he visited the house of Duryodhana, the enemy cousin of Maharaja Yudhishthira. Duryodhana was intelligent enough to satisfy the Brahmana by all means, and the great rishi wanted to give some benediction to Duryodhana. Duryodhana knew his mystic powers, and he knew also that the mystic Brahmana, if dissatisfied, could cause some havoc, and thus he designed to engage the Brahmana to show his wrath upon his enemy cousins, the Pandavas. When the rishi wanted to award some benediction to Duryodhana, the latter wished that he should visit the house of Maharaja Yudhishthira, who was the eldest and chief among all his cousins, but by his request he would go to him after he had finished his meals with his queen, Draupadi. Duryodhana knew that after Draupadi's dinner it would be impossible for Maharaja Yudhishthira to receive such a large number of Brahmana guests, and thus the rishi would be annoyed and would create some trouble for his cousin Maharaja Yudhishthira. That was the plan of Duryodhana. Durvasha Muni agreed to this proposal, and he approached the king in exile, according to the plan of Duryodhana, after the king and Draupadi had finished their meals. On his arrival at the door of Maharaja Yudhishthira, he was at once well received, and the king requested him to finish his noontime religious rites in the river, for by that time the foodstuff would be prepared. Durvasa Muni, along with his large number of disciples, went to take a bath in the river, and Maharaja Yudhishthira was in great anxiety about the guests. As long as Draupadi had not taken her meals, food could be served to any number of guests, but the rishi, by the plan of Duryodhana, reached there after Draupadi had finished her meals. When the devotees are put into difficulty, they have an opportunity to recollect the Lord with rapt attention. So Draupadi was thinking of Lord Krishna in that dangerous position, and the all-pervading Lord could at once know the dangerous position of his devotees. He therefore came there on the scene and asked Draupadi to give whatever food she might have in her stock. On her being so requested by the Lord, Draupadi was powerful because the Supreme Lord asked her for some food, and she was unable to supply it at that time. She said to the Lord that the mysterious dish which she had received from the sun god could supply any amount of food if she herself had not eaten, but on that day she had already taken her meals, and thus they were in danger. By expressing her difficulties, she began to cry before the Lord, as only a woman would do in such a position. The Lord, however, asked Draupadi to bring up the cooking pots to see if there was any particle of foodstuff left, and on Draupadi's doing so, the Lord found some particle of vegetable sticking to the pot. The Lord at once picked it up and ate it. After doing so, the Lord asked Draupadi to call for her guests, the company of Durvasha. Bhima was sent to call them from the river. Bhima said, "Why are you delaying, sirs? Come on, the food is ready for you." But the Brahmanas, because of Lord Krishna's accepting a little particle of food, felt sumptuously fed, even while they were in the water. They thought that since Maharaja Yudhishthira must have prepared many valuable dishes for them, and since they were not hungry and could not eat, the king would feel very sorry, so it was better not to go there. Thus they decided to go away. This incident proves that the Lord is the greatest mystic, and therefore he is known as Yogeshvara. Another instruction is that every householder must offer food to the Lord, and the result will be that everyone, even a company of guests numbering 10,000, will be satisfied because of the Lord's being satisfied. That is the way of devotional service. Text 12. It was by his influence only that in a fight I was able to astonish the personality of God Lord Shiva and his wife, the daughter of Mount Himalaya. Thus he, Lord Shiva, became pleased with me and awarded me his own weapon. Other demigods also delivered their respective weapons to me, and in addition I was able to reach the heavenly planets in this present body and was allowed a half-elevated seat. Purport. By the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Sri Krishna, all the demigods, including Lord Shiva, were pleased with Arjuna. The idea is that one who is favored by Lord Shiva or any other demigod may not necessarily be favored by the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna. Ravana was certainly a great devotee of Lord Shiva, but he could not be saved from the wrath of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Ramachandra. And there are many instances like that in the histories of the Puranas. But here is an instance where we can see that Lord Shiva became pleased even in the fight with Arjuna. The devotees of the Supreme Lord know how to respect the demigods, but the devotees of the demigods sometimes foolishly think that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is no greater than the demigods. By such a conception one becomes an offender and ultimately meets with the same end as Ravana and others. The instances described by Arjuna during his friendly dealings with Lord Sri Krishna are instructive for all who may be convinced by the lessons that one can achieve all favors simply by pleasing the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, whereas devotees or worshippers of the demigods may achieve only partial benefits, which are only perishable, just as the demigods themselves are. Another significance of the present verse is that Arjuna, by the grace of Lord Sri Krishna, was able to reach the heavenly planet, even with the selfsame body, and was honored by the heavenly demigod Indradeva, being seated with him half elevated. One can reach the heavenly planets by the pious acts recommended in the Shastras in the category of fruitive activities, and as stated in the Bhagavad Gita 9:21, when the reactions of such pious acts are spent, the enjoyer is again degraded to this earthly planet. The moon is also on the level with the heavenly planets, and only persons who have performed virtues only, performing sacrifices, giving charity, and undergoing severe austerities, can be allowed to enter into the heavenly planets after the duration of life of the body. Arjuna was allowed to enter into the heavenly planets in the selfsame body simply by the grace of the Lord. Otherwise, it is not possible to do so. The present attempts to enter into the heavenly planets by the modern scientists will certainly prove futile because such scientists are not on the level of Arjuna. They are ordinary human beings without any assets of sacrifice, charity, or austerities. The material body is influenced by the three modes of material nature, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance. The present population is more or less influenced by the modes of passion and ignorance, and the symptoms for such influence are exhibited in their becoming very lusty and greedy. Such degraded fellows can hardly approach the higher planetary systems. Above the heavenly planets there are many other planets also, which only those who are influenced by goodness can reach. In heavenly and other planets within the universe, the inhabitants are all highly intelligent, many more times than the human beings, and they are all pious in the higher and highest mode of goodness. They are all devotees of the Lord, and although their goodness is not unadulterated, still they are known as demigods, possessing the maximum amount of good qualities possible within the material world. Text 13. When I stayed for some days as a guest in the heavenly planets, all the heavenly demigods, including King Indradeva, took shelter of my arms, which were marked with the Gandiva bow, to kill the demon named Nivatakavacha. O King, descendant of Ajamida, at the present moment I am bereft of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by whose influence I was so powerful. Purport. The heavenly demigods are certainly more intelligent, powerful, and beautiful, and yet they had to take help from Arjuna because of his Gandiva bow, which was empowered by the grace of Lord Sri Krishna. The Lord is all-powerful, and by his grace his pure devotee can be as powerful as he may desire, and there is no limit to it. And when the Lord withdraws his power from anyone, he is powerless by the will of the Lord. Text 14. The military strength of the Kauravas was like an ocean in which there dwelled many invincible existences, and thus it was insurmountable. But because of his friendship, I, seated on the chariot, was able to cross over it, and only by his grace was I able to regain the cows, and also collect by force many helmets of the kings, which were bedecked with jewels that were sources of all brilliance. Purport. On the Kaurava side there were many stalwart commanders like Bhisma, Drona, Karpa, and Karna, and their military strength was as insurmountable as the great ocean, and yet it was due to Lord Krishna's grace that Arjuna alone, sitting on the chariot, could manage to vanquish them one after another without difficulty. There were many changes of commanders on the other side, but on the Pandava side Arjuna alone on the chariot driven by Lord Krishna could manage the whole responsibility of the great war. Similarly, when the Pandavas were living at the palace of Virata incognito, the Kauravas picked a quarrel with King Virata and decided to take away his large number of cows. While they were taking away the cows, Arjuna fought with them incognito and was able to regain the cows along with some booty taken by force. The jewels set on the turbans of the royal order. Arjuna remembered that all this was possible by the grace of the Lord. Text 15. It was he only who withdrew the duration of life from everyone, and who in the battlefield withdrew the speculative power and strength of enthusiasm from the great military phalanx made by the Kauravas, headed by Bhisma, Karna, Drona, Salya, etc. Their arrangement was expert and more than adequate, but he, Lord Sri Krishna, while going forward, did all this. Purport. The absolute personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, expands himself by his plenary Paramatma portion in everyone's heart, and thus he directs everyone in the matter of recollection, forgetfulness, knowledge, the absence of intelligence, and all psychological activities. Bhagavad Gita 15:15. As the Supreme Lord, he can increase or decrease the duration of life of a living being. Thus the Lord conducted the battle of Kurukshetra according to his own plan. He wanted that battle to establish Yudhishthira as the emperor of this planet, and to facilitate this transcendental business, he killed all who were on the opposite party by his omnipotent will. The other party was equipped with all military strength, supported by big generals like Bhisma, Drona, and Salya, and it would have been physically impossible for Arjuna to win the battle had the Lord not helped him by every kind of tactic. Such tactics are generally followed by every statesman, even in modern warfare, but they are all done materially by powerful espionages, military tactics, and diplomatic maneuvers. But because Arjuna was the Lord's affectionate devotee, the Lord did all this himself, without personal anxiety by Arjuna. That is the way of the devotional service to the Lord. Text 16. Great generals like Bhisma, Drona, Karna, Bharisrava, Susarma, Salya, Jayadratha, and Balika all directed their invincible weapons against me, but by his, Lord Krishna's grace, they could not even touch a hair on my head. Similarly, Prahlada Maharaja, the supreme devotee of Lord Narasimhadeva, was unaffected by the weapons the demons used against him. Purport. The history of Prahlada Maharaja, the great devotee of Narasimhadeva, is narrated in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Prahlada Maharaja, a small child of only 5 years, became the object of envy for his great father, Hiranyaksipu, only because of his becoming a pure devotee of the Lord. The demon father employed all his weapons to kill the devotee's son, Prahlada, but by the grace of the Lord he was saved from all sorts of dangerous actions by his father. He was thrown in a fire, in boiling water, from the top of a hill, underneath the legs of an elephant, and he was administered poison. At last the father himself took up a chopper to kill his son, and thus Narasimhadeva appeared and killed the heinous father in the presence of the son. sun. Thus no one can kill the devotee of the Lord. Similarly, Arjuna was also saved by the Lord, although all dangerous weapons were employed by his great opponents like Bhisma. Karna, born of Kunti by the sun god prior to her marriage with Maharaja Pandu, Karna took his birth with bangles and earrings, extraordinary signs for an undaunted hero. In the beginning, his name was Vasasena, but when he grew up, he presented his natural bangles and earrings to Indradeva, and thenceforward he became known as Vaikartana. After his birth from the maiden Kunti, he was thrown in the Ganges. Later, he was picked up by Adiratha, and he and his wife Radha brought him up as their own offspring. Karna was very charitable, especially toward the Brahmanas. There was nothing he could not spare for a Brahmana. In the same charitable spirit, he gave in charity his natural bangles and earrings to Indradeva, who, being very much satisfied with him, gave him in return a great weapon called Shakti. He was admitted as one of the students of Dronacharya, and from the very beginning there was some rivalry between him and Arjuna. Seeing his constant rivalry with Arjuna, Duryodhana picked him up as his companion, and this gradually grew into greater intimacy. He was also present in the great assembly of Draupadi's Svayamvara function, and when he attempted to exhibit his talent in that meeting, Draupadi's brother declared that Karna could not take part in the competition because of his being the son of a Sudra carpenter. Although he was refused in the competition, still when Arjuna was successful in piercing the fish target on the ceiling, and Draupadi bestowed her garland upon Arjuna, Karna and the other disappointed princes offered an unusual stumbling block to Arjuna while he was leaving with Draupadi. Specifically, Karna fought with him very valiantly, but all of them were defeated by Arjuna. Duryodhana was very much pleased with Karna because of his constant rivalry with Arjuna, and when he was in power, he enthroned Karna in the state of Anga. Being baffled in his attempt to win Draupadi, Karna advised Duryodhana to attack King Drupada, for after defeating him, both Arjuna and Draupadi could be arrested. But Dronacharya rebuked them for this conspiracy, and they refrained from the action. Karna was defeated many times, not only by Arjuna, but also by Bhimasena. He was the king of the kingdom of Bengal, Orissa, and Madras combined. Later on, he took an active part in the Rajasuya sacrifice of Maharaja Yudhishthira, and when there was gambling between the rival brothers, designated by Shakuni, Karna took part in the game, and he was very pleased when Draupadi was offered as a bet in the gambling. This fed his old grudge. When Draupadi was in the game, he was very enthusiastic to declare the news, and it is he who ordered Dushashana to take away the garments of both the Pandavas and Draupadi. He asked Draupadi to select another husband, because being lost by the Pandavas, she was rendered a slave of the Kurus. He was always an enemy of the Pandavas, and whenever there was an opportunity, he tried to curb them by all means. During the battle of Kurukshetra, he foresaw the conclusive result, and he expressed his opinion that due to Lord Krishna's being the chariot driver of Arjuna, the battle should be won by Arjuna. He always differed with Bhisma, and sometimes he was proud enough to say that within 5 days he could finish up the Pandavas, if Bhisma would not interfere with his plan of action. But he was much mortified when Bhisma died. He killed Ghatotkacha with the Shakti weapon obtained from Indradeva. His son Vrisasena was killed by Arjuna. He killed the largest number of Pandava soldiers. At last there was a severe fight with Arjuna, and it was he only who was able to knock off the helmet of Arjuna. But it so happened that the wheel of his chariot stuck in the battlefield mud, and when he got down to set the wheel aright, Arjuna took the opportunity and killed him, although he requested Arjuna not to do so. Napta, or Burisrava. Burisrava was the son of Somadatta, a member of the Kuru family. His other brother was Salya. Both the brothers and the father attended the Svayamvara ceremony of Draupadi. All of them appreciated the wonderful strength of Arjuna due to his being the devotee friend of the Lord, and thus Burisrava advised the sons of Dhritarashtra not to pick any quarrel or fight with them. All of them also attended the Rajasuya yajna of Maharaja Yudhishthira. He possessed one Aksahini regiment of army, cavalry, elephants, and chariots, and all of these were employed in the battle of Kurukshetra on behalf of Duryodhana's party. He was counted by Bhima as one of the Yathapatis. In the battle of Kurukshetra, he was especially engaged in a fight with Satyaki, and he killed 10 sons of Satyaki. Later on, Arjuna cut off his hands, and he was ultimately killed by Satyaki. After his death, he merged into the existence of Visvadeva. Trigarta, or Susharma, son of Maharaja Vridakshetra, he was the king of Trigardatasa, and he was also present in the Svayamvara ceremony of Draupadi. He was one of the allies of Duryodhana, and he advised Duryodhana to attack the Matsyadesa, Darbhanga. During the time of cow stealing in Virata Nagara, he was able to arrest Maharaja Virata, but later Maharaja Virata was released by Bhima.